You killed the music.
Oh man, I was trying to add some special effects on top. I didn't think it would cut it out. Wow, what a buzzkill!
Damn, Chad. What's up, man?
Nothing much. What's up?
I have some exciting news. I just made my first THORChain GitLab commit late last night, and I'm quite excited.
What?
Yeah, not to the core protocol. I made some edits to the website, and I pushed them out. Pluto, shout out Pluto. Thank you so much. Got my first commits in the book.
Wow, so you're basically a developer at this point.
Yep. Pluto said I'm a web developer now, so there you go.
Update the bio. Update the LinkedIn.
Yeah, trying to update the THORChain.com website and just like get that going because I've been kind of falling behind on the ball on that one. Hey, Chad.
What's up, guys?
Mr. Chad, how's it going?
Not too bad, I guess. How you guys doing?
Pretty good. Eating some breakfast for lunch.
Yeah, so I was like snacking on some chips here or something.
No, you're good.
By the way,
Yeah.
I see Cans in the audience. I got a bone to pick with you, Can. You guys had a DeFi 2023 you as in Delphi, and you didn't even talk about THORChain. The question came up of like oh, in terms of cross chain things that are born to be cross chain, blah blah blah. And the only thing it talked about was Cosmos, which is to me nutty.
Let's get him up here.
Yeah, he's requesting. I thought he mentioned it briefly, at least, if I remember. I was kind of tuning in and out.
There was like one line in the report, I think, about THORChain. I don't know if they mentioned it on the space, though. I didn't stay the whole time. Hey, Ken.
Hello, everyone. So I'm walking outside. Yeah, so it's definitely not a one-liner. We have a paragraph for THORChain in the year-end report. In yesterday's Twitter Spaces, I really wanted to talk more. It's just that I had to respect like my colleagues' time because there was a host controlling like the Twitter Spaces and making sure everyone gets like their time to talk and whatnot. And yeah, like that's pretty much it.
I actually do have a question that's kind of related. So a couple weeks ago, I think that maybe Ryan Selkis put out something about like the holdings of like the Delphi team members, basically saying like this many Delphi team members hold all these coins, and it's basically like THORChain had like some number, maybe like 8 or so last year, and then this year it looks like no one on the team has any rune, and obviously like that's not a problem or anything. So, but I was just wondering if you had any like insight into that.
I don't know what kind of thing you're referring to. First of all,
Sorry, I think that was actually on the Masari report. Cow.
That was my story.
Yeah.
Oh, my bad.
Interesting. Yeah, I know. I
Irrelevant.
definitely know some members of the team and quite substantial number that they are THORChain fans. Obviously, I don't know if they hold, how much they hold, or whatever. I never asked those kind of things unless we have to like give disclosures and whatnot. But I definitely know there are quite some number of THORChain fans. Yeah, but like, yeah, that definitely didn't mean to not mention THORChain or whatever. It's just that people, like everybody, had their time to talk, and so I didn't want to get the spotlight or anything like that.
Do you have any theories on why Cosmos people seem to kind of act like it doesn't exist sometimes? Like, yeah, because that one, I'm not sure who it was that was speaking, but yeah, there was one question like specifically about cross-chain, and then the answer was just all about Cosmos, and it does just come off as odd. And I know you're a big fan of THORChain, but it's just it's endlessly strange to me, like why some people just like don't look at it. I I don't understand.
Yeah, for Cosmos, definitely the IBC thing. Although I completely understand why THORChain doesn't at this point integrate with the IBC, and I agree it's the right choice. But for Cosmos, I think that's pretty much it. It's never THORChain is never mentioned as a Cosmos chain, not at least like not in my friends and the kind of environment. But generally, broadly, the biggest criticism I get usually when I start talking about it is that a lot of people. Well, first of all, it's like extremely hard to explain THORChain. Like it's just really hard. Before it was cross-chain swaps. Now it's more than that. So like if you start to get into these like mechanics, first it's very hard to explain it. It's very hard for example, the other day, Eric Wall was interested to take a look, and I'm pretty sure he got overwhelmed with all of the documentation and like information out there. He quickly realized that it's this is my assumption. He quickly realized that it's going to be a rabbit hole for him to go through all of it, and so I feel like he gave up. I don't know. Maybe he's studying now. That's just me, like my estimation. But that's one thing. The other thing is the biggest criticism I get is usually that a lot of the economics hinges on rune price. Rune price compared to these non-rune assets, and that's like and whether or not that's sustainable or not. So those are the two biggest things I get usually.
Yeah, I guess the IBC thing is like that's kind of where the differentiator is in like where people would consider something like a Cosmos asset, and we see that all the time. Like that happened at the I don't know if anyone else saw this, but there was a Dex like order book roundtable yesterday, and they were also talking about some of the similar considerations, and that always just kind of comes up. So nothing new on that front. I don't think I don't think it's really much to be like gained from there. Like just going in circles about THORChain being a Cosmos project or not. Like it is a Cosmos project, but it's not maybe what people would consider like a core like Cosmos project, like close to the center of the stack there.
Yeah, from my perspective, I understand the Cosmos community wanting Rune to be IBC because then, it feels like it's part of that community. But when talking about cross-chain, it feels like even without that, THORChain is so important because the whole point of THORChain is that it's connecting you to other ecosystems and things that are not and never will be IBC compatible, like native Bitcoin, all these other chains. So, to be that route out of IBC into everything else feels so valuable, and like that is cross chain. So I'm always hopeful that the Cosmos community will get more excited about this.
Actually, this past week, I don't know if anyone else has seen this, but Osmosis, I believe, I've seen doing like I don't know whether they just announced this or something, but like basically like Dex aggregation type thing, where I saw that they were maybe doing some kind of like multi-Dex, basically like THORChain's Dex aggregation, but with like Kujira or like one of the other Cosmos Dexes. And I'm not super familiar with this stuff, but I'm wondering if anyone else has any like more insight onto that, because obviously like getting Osmosis into the Dex aggregation stack on THORChain would be super great, especially if it could just go through like basically an Osmosis Dex aggregator to go through the Atom pool with IBC or something like that. It seems like a no-brainer. So I'm wondering if anyone else actually knows more about like Dex aggregation in the Cosmos, more of the core Dexes to their community.
Yeah, usually when I get into it with people on Twitter, I try to tease out like what is it they actually want. Like, is it Rune to be IBC, or is it just the ability to swap in one transaction? Because to me, what you just described is the really exciting part. to be able to swap from any IBC asset to anything that's supported in THORChain, 100%. I mean, everyone wants that. That's huge. I know THORSwap would be delighted to be able to aggregate that. But yeah, the IBC rune part, it's like, okay, for what? Like, how does that benefit THORChain? What do we get out of that? But yeah, I don't know if we want to keep going on this, but
yeah, we kind of beat death a lot already. I mean, importing assets would be interesting, but then it's like, is Dex aggregator just better? And like, for the most part, the answer is like, the price is always going to be better with the Dex aggregator unless we have a deep pool to start off with, which is just not the case, because you can get a Cosmos, an atom yield, just staking on the protocol and get those airdrops that people like and whatever. So it's like, there's just not that liquidity to really probably get the smaller tokens. Like, there's only even a couple million in Atom on THORChain.
I do think IBC enabling for synths or composite assets, things like that in the future, is more interesting to me than probably Rune itself. Though there are some crazy ideas that are kind of interesting, like the THORChain of THORChains, the network of THORChains idea might tie in IBC in some way. But to imagine like a separate protocol somewhere in Cosmos that's building things on top of synthetics, or even like composite buckets of synthetics, like rebalancing tools, like even perps or stuff like that, if that was built outside of THORChain but using synthetics that are still redeemable back on THORChain, I think that area is pretty interesting.
Just a better nomic PTC.
Yeah, I suppose so. I'm not deeply familiar with it, but I guess I guess you probably could build some of that with that already.
Yes, synths would be a little bit difficult just because we can only have so much of them, right? There are synth caps for a reason, and to be honest, the Savers feature will probably just fill the synths. Over a long period of time, will just do its job and fill the synth cap. So we don't really need another demand center for synths, to be honest with you. I think what we already have is more than sufficient. But
when I was saying synths there, I even mean like potentially like yield bearing, like make the Savers synth exportable, hypothetically, of course. But I know that's been something we've sort of talked about.
Yeah, you could possibly do it with derived assets, but that's another conversation, because derived assets will come as part of lending, but they'll be turned off in terms of available to the community. It's only be used by like the lending protocol itself can touch it. And if people want to make it more readily available for other people to use it outside the lending protocol and use it for other purposes like IBC and have a derived Bitcoin or a derived Ether or whatever, that you can do. Or Tor, actually, another stable coin.
Yeah, I did want to ask you some questions about the lending design today, Chad. So I don't know whether you want to get into that. There's nothing else I could really think of that is like top of mind for things to discuss. So I kind of wanted to get a little bit more info on, especially the collateralization ratio of the lending protocol, and basically like how the collateralization ratio adjusts. Like what are the circumstances where it goes up and down? Like what is the equilibrium state for the CR, and then like what causes it to move up and down, and like what range do you like? Have you thought about like what ranges that we're like most likely to see, or just like
yeah?
I think that's the part of THORFi that is like hardest for me to grasp. Right now.
Fair question. So let's just kind of recap what CR is first, people who don't know. CR is just short for collateralization ratio. Another way of saying the same thing in general DeFi speak is an LTV, or loan to value ratio. They're basically the same, but just the numbers look different, but they're describing the same concept. And so the question around CR is like, if I put in $10,000 worth of Bitcoin and the CR is at 200%, or AKA LTV would be 50%, those two things are the same thing, then I would get $5,000 as my debt. So that's what a collateralization ratio is, just basically calculating for every $8 you put in, how many cents do you get out in terms of your debt, right? And so the way that we calculate this number is, so generally in most DeFi platforms, you pick what you want, right? You can say, oh, I want 200% or 50% LTV or 25% LTV or whatever it is, 300% below a CR. But for us, we don't allow people to pick it. It's just the market itself that dictates what the CR is going to be. So how that's calculated, though, is say you had say there's let's just say there's 5,000 Bitcoin in the Bitcoin pool, right? And right now there's no loans taken out of the Bitcoin pool. And somebody's coming along, which is Chad THOReau's coming along, or FamiliarCow coming along, and they have 2 BDC as their collateral, right? So we calculate from the low end of having no loans, and the starting point is like, let's just call it 200% collateralization ratio, and then when you like max out the size of the pool, that would be the max CR, which let's call that 1,000, for example. And so when we calculate how much this person's going to owe, we say, okay, there's two, including the BDC that Kyle is now throwing into a loan, along with old collateral that's being stored by the network, versus the depth of the pool, right? And so in this case, it would be 201% or something like this. But if there was like already 4,900 loan collateral put in, BDC collateral put into this pool, and the max CR is 1,000, then the next person to open a loan will effectively get close to 1,000, right, as their CR. So basically, as people enter and open loans, the CR increases, and then when people close the loans, the CR decreases. That's one aspect of how it moves. The second aspect of how it moves is just the price of asset to Rune, right? So if there's 5,000 BDC in the pool right now, and then the BDC price goes up relative to Rune, well, then an arbitrage bot will increase the quantity of Rune in the network, but then decrease the quantity of BDC, right? Because the BDC's value gone up. There's too much BDC in the pool. Arbitrage bot takes out some BDC, and so now the pool depth has decreased from 5,000 down to 4,990 or something like this, whatever that is. And so now, because that depth had changed, that will cause the CR to increase in that scenario. So when asset outperforms Rune, the CR naturally increases, and then when Rune outperforms the asset, the CR naturally decreases, right? And so if Rune's performing well over asset, we want more loans to be taken out, because the loans that are currently taken out are more and more are looking at a healthier and healthier state. And so we can say, okay, we can take out more loans now because we have less risk, and so we can kind of like just naturally grow with the supply of, or the value of Rune increasing with the feature. That's in a nutshell. Now, each individual pool is going to have their own CR, right? And so some pools are probably going to have naturally a higher CR, the ones that are more in demand. For example, Bitcoin will probably be this. And then maybe pools where there's not much interest, AVAX would probably be a good example of this, because there's already lots of ways you can like get a loan on your AVAX within the AVAX community. So there's like more competition in that case. So maybe the CR would be naturally kind of find like a floating middle, which would be lower than what we'd see on Bitcoin. But each individual pool will have their own CR, and that CR will increase and decrease based upon the demand. Eventually, you'll get to this kind of floating point between supply and demand of like, this is what the industry feels is a good CR for Bitcoin, and this is what a good CR is for Ether, and a good CR for Litecoin, and so forth and so on. So we'll naturally see these things just move.
Got it. So there can't ever be a greater liability for the loans and the total depth of the pool, and that's the point where the maximum collateralization ratio is reached?
Sort of. So there's a Mimir that tells the network relative to the depth of the pool, how much are we going to calculate this as part of like, the amount we're calculating the CR. And so right now the default is like, we can put it at, 10,000 basis points would be 100% of the pool, and 5,000 basis points would be half the pool, and 20,000 basis points would be 2x the pool. So this is just another lever that we can start small and say, we're not going to do the whole pool. We're just going to do 20% of the pool or something like this, just to start small, right? And then we can increase that lever to 100% of the pool, and then eventually to 200%, and eventually to 100% of the whatever. Like you could go as high as you arbitrarily want to do, but that's just going to be another thing that the community and the nodes are going to vote on to like scale it up over time.
That makes sense. And the other part of that is, does the collateralization ratio increase linearly, or is there some kind of curve involved there, or is it just as it fills up more of the capacity, does it just go up linearly?
It's mostly linearly, but it also keep in mind that it includes the collab that you're currently adding, not just the collab that's already existing. So if the CR right now is at 300%, and then I'm going to make a small loan of like one BDC, I'd probably get maybe 301%, something like it wouldn't cause like a huge shift, right? But if I put in like 1,000 BDC as my collateral, well then it's going to jump from, I'm actually not going to get 3, I'm going to get 300, I'm going to get maybe closer to 400 or 500 or some much larger number. So like it's going to say like it's sensitive to how large your loan is, right? And if you want, you can like break it up into smaller loans and like open up many loans and just kind of every day do like 1/10 of a BDC or something like this. You could do that, and it may be more economical to do so. But same thing as swapping, right? It's more economical to break your swaps into multiple trades rather than a single trade. So we'll see that kind of same concept be played out as well.
Thanks for clearing that up. The collateralization ratio part, because that seems like the thing that makes the most difference in terms of like usability for the feature and just safety for the feature. So like, I feel like that's the thing that is just not concrete right now, and we just don't know how that exactly what values we want to put in there to actually like make this not like where it's unusable, like collateralization ratio, but also like not risky as in like, right. Too low of a collateralization ratio.
That's why you have just the free market determine that place, right? Effectively.
So do you have thoughts yet on where those constants might start or might end up in the future? Like, so if it's capped at, let's say, 20% of the total pool depth can be outstanding loans, right? Then like there's a max CR at 20%, correct? So that if that's, 900% or 1,000,000% or whatever, I think we're trying to get our head around, so then what does it look like at 10%? What does it look like at 15%?
10% of what?
Of the pool. So if 20% is the cap at the time,
so
right?
Then that would be like, so there's 5,000 BDC, 20% of that, and then that would be your kind of like your denominator, so to speak, and then your numerator is the total amount of collateral that has been collected, including the one that you're contributing, and then that would determine between those 2 points, right?
Got it. Yeah.
I mean, in the end, we can set how we want. Like the max CR should be some ridiculously high number, a number that's so high that nobody in their right mind would ever take it. Like that's like you want it to be something unattainable in a sense, right? So that we find some sort of like place that the community, that the industry is willing to take. Say, for given the protocol risk of THORChain and the attributes of this loan. And whatever, I'm willing to take, a 500% collateralization ratio, or I'm willing to take a 600%, I'm willing to take an 800%. It just depends on the community, like the industry just to determine what that is. And the higher that CR is, the better it is for the network, right?
Yeah. All right. More questions. So if we're at the limit, let's say it's at 20%, we're at that 20%. We have a 900% collateralization ratio. Mm-hmm. We think that's enough. Can someone take out a loan at that 900%, or is it just shut off? Can you not take out more loans until
then
it's raised?
You can always anybody can always take out a loan. There's actually nothing stopping anybody from ever taking out an additional loan or creating a loan, whatever. What's doing it is that every time somebody does that, the CR gets higher and higher and higher and higher, and eventually it's going to get to some point where just nobody's going to want to do it, right? Because if I was going to offer you, you give me $10,000 and I'll give you a $10 loan, like, that's quite silly, and nobody would ever take that deal because that's just kind of ridiculous and pointless. And so like there's that line that's going to be created by the industry of figuring out where that line is of like, the point where it's too much or the point where it's not too little. Like it's just kind of perfect place. And this the free market will push it to that line, wherever that line is.
Yes, but it's also like we as the network, like and everyone that like contributes to it needs to determine like what parameter, because we need to actually set the parameters that control that and constantly monitor that and be confident that we made like the right decision. So like I wonder if you thought of anything about like the methodology of like how to arrive at what we think is the right number.
It's the same thing of like the max CR is going to be a number that doesn't actually matter. Like the same thing as like the min bond is a number that doesn't really actually matter. Like, yeah, it's a hard limit that's placed on the minimum amount of room that you can bond, but like nobody's churning into the network with 200 million room, right? Like you really have to have at least, I think, 500 or 600 on the lower end, right? And so it's like it's a number that's set, but like will never be touched. And similar conceptually, it's not a little bit similar to what I was just saying about the minimum bond. So I think the max CR should be some crazy number like 10,000% or maybe even 20,000%, something ludicrous, or 100,000%. It can arbitrarily be as large as you want. That doesn't really actually matter. And then you place like how much of the pool do you want to include in the calculation of the CR, and that could be 20%, 100%, 200%, some number. My recommendation is we start small, maybe at like 50% of the pool. Something like this possibly, and we set the CR, the max CR, to be really high, like 20,000%, something ludicrous, and then you set the min CR to be something. This is debatable whether we start small, like large, and then inch downward, like start high at like 800%, right, or 900% or something like this, where maybe not everybody's going to want to love that deal. Maybe there's a few people that want that deal, whatever, and then wait a week and then you inch it down to 100 points less, right, to 800% or 700%, and then you just kind of inch it down to help us discover the line, the free market,
like starting a bid basically. For the loans. That'd be an interesting way to start it.
It's kind of like that. It's kind of like an auction, if you want to call it that. But or we do the opposite of that. We say we're going to do it 200, and we do it at 200%, which is a really great CR. That'd be immaculate. You should dive at that if you can get it. But because we're only like 20% of the depth or something like this of the pool, it'll scale from 200% to the max like very quickly. Only like a handful of loans would be able to get out before it would be like not a handful, but you'd scale very fast from 200% to 20,000%. Right. And so you can cut that. There's different ways you can do it. And I think they're all more or less the same to some degree. Like they're all accomplish the same task of discovering the max CR that the industry is willing to take for a loan of these attributes. But it could be debated of how we want to actually approach it.
So can I clarify something that might be kind of basic, but when we're talking about loans as a percent of the total pool depth, is that the collateral of the loan compared to the pool depth and not the borrowed amount?
That's relative to the collateral deposit.
Right. Because the collateral is really what the liability. That's the liability of the pool, not the outstanding loan amount.
Right. Because
that's
what they owe us, right? Us as a protocol.
So that makes me wonder, like how. So 20%, and then we're talking already about going like 50, 100, or even greater than the pool. I mean, that starts to get really crazy again, especially like when we also factor in synths and like, how do you think about that scaling up so high?
Well, so the lending is not relational to the actual pool. We're just using the pool as a measurement tool to help us like do collateralization ratio discovery. Like the actual how many loans are out relative to the pool actually has no real, doesn't matter from a safety or security perspective of the network itself. Like it doesn't matter if it's 20% of the pool or 1,000 times the pool. Like it has no actual relationship to the LPs or the savers or anything like this. It's just we're only using the pool as a natural mechanism for the community to inform the network of like what are really popular assets like Bitcoin because it's got a lot of room in its pool versus not so popular, like maybe that's, Bitcoin Cash or something. I don't know, whatever it might be. So it's just using that kind of like knowledge of like, these are bigger assets, these are small assets to help us kind of figure out how to scale these things in a safe way. Because if we don't want to take on too much risk, for example, like if we do a whole lot of lending with a low CR of like Doge, for example, right? That's detached from the pool or whatever. Then you can get to a place where like, things can get quite, there could be a lot of loans out on a low CR effectively, that's not good. We don't want to do that. So we want to say like, oh, these are safer, more secure assets, which is like Bitcoin be that. And then these other assets are smaller. So we don't want to be as exposed to those. And so I assume that what we're seeing for savers in terms of the monetary popularity of savers between the different assets, like almost 3/4 of savers is Bitcoin, right? And then they're like the other 1/3 is basically one fourth is basically Ether, and then there's like a bunch of little tiny like slivers of value. So I don't expect those to be quite popular. I expect kind of like Bitcoin to be huge, obviously, to be very, very popular. So it's just there to kind of help us kind of like discover, using the pools just help us discover what the actual CR is going to be and on a per pool basis.
Yeah, to go off Chad THOReau's point a little bit, like you can see his point where like so the purpose of the lending protocol is we want people to be comfy in their loans and to be taking out loans and not closing them. Like we want people to never close their loan. That is the end goal of the network for someone taking out a loan is to never pay it back. So we want people to not be worrying about the collateral that they put in and whether they'll be able to retrieve it back.
Yeah.
But that seems like the major thing about that would cause people to worry is knowing that there is more debt, like the system is more in debt than there is actual liquidity on the network. And obviously, like we know that arbitrageurs will put in native asset, will bring in native assets when prices are out of line, but the question that we can't answer really is like, does that cause lenders to want to pay back, especially at like unfavorable times to the network and cause some kind of like mass payback of loans, which is the negative of it.
But they're not exposed to that stuff. Like they're not even exposed to the room price. Even the room price dives by 50%, like to a borrower, they don't give two shits. Right, because they're not exposed to it. They still get their Bitcoin back. It doesn't really matter what room's price is to them. But like the pools themselves are not backing the lending. It's the lending protocol. It's the Rune asset that's backing the lending. So it doesn't matter how much BTC is actually in the network, because even if you mint a bunch of Rune to buy back the BTC, send back the person on BTC, like arbitrage bots will put that BTC we just sent out right back into the network just moments later. So you have because it's an AMM, you have effectively an infinite amount of Bitcoin, right? Because as soon as you swap Bitcoin out, the Bitcoin comes back in through arbitrage. And so it becomes like kind of like a yo-yo, right? So you basically have an infinite supply of Bitcoin that you can trade your room for what's in the network. It only becomes a problem with like if your loan is so large that you have more Bitcoin in your collateral than the entire pool combined of a single person, then that becomes problematic. In which case, you just have to do it. Just do it twice. Like pay half your loan off now, and then wait for the arbitrage opportunity, and then pay half of it again, and then you're done. You still get your money back.
I see what you mean. And also, let me just invite everyone that wants to come up and like ask questions, especially about lending, to just request and come up now. I'm just interested in hearing some more, especially like if you have any comments about like the potential like risks of THORFi and like the levers that we had to control those, and just your thoughts about like the weak areas of THORFi and like what we can do to just bolster the strength there.
Yeah, I mean, you want to go savers and lending, or just one of those two things?
Let's stick to lending, because I think we covered savers a lot already.
Yeah.
Like we know that the risk of lenders is put on traditional LPs. So
Yeah.
I think that's like, yeah.
So
that's already kind of there. Let's talk about lending a bit.
The risks of lending is actually much smaller than it sounds like if you look at it. So I'm actually not terribly. I'm much more concerned about the risks of synths than I am to lending, by good margin, I even say. The reason why is because the rune supply is still the same. It's 500 million total supply that can't exist. Right now, it's actually less than that. It's 485, and that's the reason why it's 15 million short is because of the kill switch. Right, we started the ability to switch from BEP2 or ERC20 rune, and some people just didn't do that, and so the ratio that is recoverable is kind of dwindling over the time span of a year. So, in effect, we have like 15 million rune that's just like that has been burnt and just kind of staying burnt right in the current moment. So the worst case scenario is if the design of the lending doesn't actually accomplish the goal it's trying to accomplish, which is basically just trying to buy and burn lots of rune. And instead of burning rune, we start minting rune, like a net inflationary. Then you can get to a place where we mint back the 15 million rune we've already burnt from the kill switch. And then beyond that point, the reserve would back the remaining loans, whatever that would be, which would probably be, some small amount, I would guess, just because we have the ability to start small on this feature, and scale up over time. And so we can wait to see, to get confirmation that the assumptions made around this concept, that it works and its functions. We can see that it works before we kind of start scaling it more and more and more and more. So we have that ability to kind of like, to know beforehand of when something is working or when something is not working, and not allow the feature to scale some massive quantity before we get to that point. So to me, it's like the worst case scenario is like we just mint back the 15 million rune we killed in the kill switch, and we lose a little bit of rune in the reserve, probably not much. So it's like, yeah, it's all right. And so every time you add some sort of feature like this, or anytime you have some sort of financial instrument, there's always risks, right? Like even like every financial system out there has some failure scenarios or some things that can go wrong. That's true of TradFi, CFI, and DeFi. The question you have to ask yourself is like, is it worth the risk, right? What are the statistical odds that these kind of failure scenarios actually happen? And then what is the benefit to the protocol by having a feature that does the thing that we've been talking about lending does? And so for me, like with this lending design is completely like innovative, completely revolutionary, you can say, just because this lending concept doesn't exist anywhere in any market in any place on the entire planet. That includes DeFi, CFI, TradFi, everything. There's nothing we've never seen alone with these kind of attributes before. And that is, to me, a huge game changer that's worth experimenting with at the very minimum. I suspect that the feature will work quite well just because rune's price would pump with the usage of the feature. The more it gets used, the more rune that gets bought, and the more rune that gets burned, and the more pressure comes on rune's price to go up to outperform the assets around it, right? Bitcoin especially, right? So it'll, I think, naturally quite easily the micro will outperform the macro of these assets just because of the burning. I mean, imagine we did 3x the pools eventually, right? And that's what, how many millions of rune? Was a 30 million rune in the pools right now, so it's like 3x that. So you're talking about buying and burning 100 million rune from circulating supply.
I think it's around 80 million in the pools right now, if I'm not mistaken.
All right, well then, if you do 3x the pools at that point, you're talking about buying and burning 200 million rune out of circulation. Like that, if that number doesn't blow your mind, it probably should. I mean, that would be drastic. Not to mention that studies have shown that deflating a coin is not a 1-to-1 ratio. Like if you have the coin quantity in supply, it doesn't double the price. You think it would. Mathematically, it seems like it would. But the psychology shows that the price actually changed 5.2x what it was before, right? So because Bitcoiners or crypto people in general love deflationary assets. It gets them all excited, so it creates a lot of interest in buying, and outside of the context of just the halving of the supply. So you actually have a multiplier on top of the actual burning that's happened, just because of people love the idea of a depreciatory asset, right? So, I mean, I feel pretty comfortable with it and quite confident about it personally. But we should try it first on a small scale, and then scale up over time. And as we feel more and more confident about it, then let it scale, let it continue to buy and burn more and more rune, and as much as the industry is willing to do, and cause the rune price to go up, which causes the security to go up, which causes the pools to get deeper. Trade volume naturally increases with that. I mean, it just becomes this kind of like amazing thing.
I brought up Con. I don't know if you had some comments about lending, Con.
Yeah. So, something that I was thinking the other day, I just want to share some thought. So, like when lending is described, there's usually this mental model where, like, the first time, so somebody comes in, takes out the loan, and the protocol lends out. An outsider comes, deposits collateral, and then the debt is minted. And during that process, rune is being burned, and so like during the time of lending, the protocol is a net positive position. What matters is the time when the loan is being repaid, and if you look at the time of debt being minted and debt being repaid, like depending on rune's price against non-rune, the result of it can be net inflationary or net deflationary. So usually the mental model is that, like, if we're in a bull market, then rune is going to outprice these bigger market cap coins, and so like there's not much to worry about in that scenario, and I totally agree with that. What I don't fully agree with is that in bear market, there's this argument that in bear market, the collateral can fall below the debt, at which point there won't be much incentive to repay the loan, and so that won't manifest as a stress on rune supply. However, that assumption assumes that collateral is like just went straight down below the debt amount. In reality, what I started to think is that, like, the collateral ratio, let's imagine a collateral ratio of like 600 or like 800%, right? It's going to be determined by market, but let's say the market has decided on the 800 like collateral ratio. And so as the prices of assets fall, the collateral can still go down. It can approach the debt, but it can still remain higher for a long time, right? Because, like, in order for it to go below, the market must crash like 90%. And then that can happen over a course of like months. And so during that time, people actually might lose interest in lending as a product, and like they may just like not want to hold Bitcoin anymore, right? They might just want to like swap it to a stable. And so let's say I have a collateral at $800. It's falling in the form of Bitcoin, and the price is falling down. My debt is $100. So the price falls down, and now it's like, let's say the collateral is like 700, 600, 500, 400. I don't necessarily have to wait until the collateral is like below the debt. I can just like repay my debt and get my like Bitcoin, and then like swap it to a stable and just like exit the system, right? So I might just lose interest in holding crypto assets. So I think there's like a lot of emphasis on this, like, like people won't pay back their loans when it's below the debt, but in reality, like that may not turn out to be very healthy way to describe the potential realistic scenarios.
Yeah, I think what you're describing is fair and true, right? I think some people will do the thing that you're describing, that their collateral is worth 800, their debt's worth 100, and it goes down to 300, and then they repay their loan and get the $300 worth of their collateral back, and that's there. Totally true. Totally agree with what you're saying. But the vast majority of people don't think that way, and the vast majority of people who take out loans aren't your advanced trader type of person, right? And you should just ride things. I think there's something to be said of just holding on to your debt, and just kind of like as your kind of hedge to your collateral. So if market goes down, you still have your $1,000 you have, or $100, whatever it is. I think what I'm most interested in is not so much the scenarios in which people can repay their loans and have a net inflation. What I'm interested in is what is the overall market tendency, and that's probably the most important concept. It's not so much can an individual do what you're describing. Absolutely true. Will the market do what you're describing? Probably not.
Why not? Why not? Because at the end of the day, borrowers, they're holding.
Well, so let me give you an example. BlockFi was going out of business, right, or was becoming insolvent, and it was increasingly clear that was the case. People were talking about it, and people were, in reality though, only half the people actually even closed their loans out of BlockFi in that scenario, right? It might be a surprising number, but that's what I'm told what actually happened. So it's the market isn't as as logical as what you're thinking in the context of what an individual might be wanting to de-risk themselves by closing their loan and just selling their BTC and then going back to the dollar. Individuals certainly do that. I just don't think the market does that.
On Khan's point, I think one scenario where that is common is that people use loans to go long, right? They use it as leverage, right? They borrow against BTC in this case, and they buy more BTC. So what Khan is describing is basically closing along at a loss, which seems like a pretty common scenario if the trade doesn't go your way, right?
Yeah, even you can do that if you want to, and I will guarantee you that some people will do that. But you have to imagine that this is not just an investment tool in a sense of what taking a hedge on Bitcoin or something like this, but also my hope that people actually use to actually do things in their lives and take out cash and buy a car or something like this. In which case, they'll pay it down over time, and that'll be a fine thing to do, rather than reacting to Bitcoin's price being changed or what have you.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's a fair scenario. I don't think that means that everybody does it. I guess the thing that would be cool to see modeling around is the totals.
Most people, right, just look at the bull and the bear thing, right? Look at the last bull and the current bear. Most people have Bitcoin and they just held through it, right? Some people sold their Bitcoin to stables and they're going to buy back in at the bottom, blah, blah, blah. But the vast majority of people did not do that, right? Is that a fair thing to say, or people disagree with that statement?
Yeah.
No, I generally believe that people hold. Yeah, that's true.
Because most people the majority of traders are emotional traders, right? Most of the money is dumb money, right? I think Ken would agree with me on this. And people are holding their Bitcoin in a loan, whatever, and they think Bitcoin's going to hit 100K, like basically everybody was saying in the last bull market. And that didn't happen, and we just tanked from 61 down to 20 in a relatively short period of time, thanks to Terra and FTX and these kind of calamities that just tanked the price very quickly, right? That's what we see almost every cycle. We didn't have the blow off top that we've had in previous cycles to this last one, but even with that, the vast majority of people just hold through it. And I'm one of them. I didn't sell any Bitcoin that I had, right? I still have the same amount of Bitcoin as I did, at the top of the bull, and I don't feel bad about it either, to be honest.
I'm laughing because I'm pretty much same. I did soul. That's.
I love it. You're arguing for a scenario that you yourself don't do.
No, but I count myself as a power user though. I mean, obviously, like people who use this product will be pretty much in the weeds of crypto as well.
I don't know.
I think at least in the beginning. But yeah, like my argument was that generally, like if you look at it from a lens of like if you look at it from a lens of yes, your collateral will be there. You can always get your collateral back. That all makes sense. But like your collateral, it if your collateral is an exposure to crypto and you just want to like sell your crypto, then the rune supply will be stressed at that
Yeah.
point. And like I'm just like pointing this out because I've seen a number of times when this landing, like how powerful it is described, is that like too much emphasis is on like the scenario when collateral is below the depth.
Yeah.
I 100% agree. If collateral is below the depth, yes, people aren't going to pay, and that's a good case for THORChain because we're going to be able to like keep that liquidity when like everything is like getting drained out of liquidity.
Yeah.
That's great, but the thing is like that's usually applicable to like short, like sharp falls in my mind.
Yeah.
Like if like prices tank like really sharp, people won't be able to like react to it pretty quickly and stuff like that. But if like market like tanks like slowly, maybe that's not going to be the case. So I'm just pointing to that.
But it's also important to kind of think about that when somebody actually does close a loan, right, and it does cause a net inflation in that particular loan case, they also just decrease the CR, right, which creates pressure for more people to open up a new loan. So there's a good chance that if somebody closing a loan will be, in some sense, replaced by somebody opening up a new loan and causing deflation, right? So like, there's always going to be some amount of loans that are open at all times, just because as soon as something it gets closed, another one, there's pressure to open up a new one, right? And so at any given point in time, there's going to be X number of loans out that has burnt Y number of room, blah blah blah. And so even in that scenario where we are inflating by some amount, it's like still net deflationary even at that moment. It becomes a problem if like it happens like every bear market, the thing that you're describing, and over the time span of like the next 4 or 5 cycles that we eventually get back to a net inflationary situation. That is possible, but we probably wouldn't be able to see that in the first couple cycles. Do you know what I mean by that?
Right. So like if the market's tanking and I'm like I'm a holder, like I'm in my mind, I just like decided to hold like Bitcoin for 5 years or so, or whatever. In that case, like that's a good strategy for me, right? I can just like as people get out of the lending, like they pay back their debt, collateral's ratio drops. Now I can take out more debt on my Bitcoin, and if I want to lever up, just let's imagine a levering up use case here. Now I can lever up more on my Bitcoin, and then I can get to keep it. So that's probably a better strategy for me than just like holding Bitcoin. I can hold more Bitcoin basically by doing that. So yeah, that makes sense. Like there will always be this like constant demand to use the product for sure.
Right. And so because of that, it's going to take a long period. If there is a problem where things are just tending towards inflation, in my view, it would take many years and probably many cycles to get to the quantity they require to actually cause a net inflation. But if that was happening, we would probably see it years in advance, to be honest with you, most likely, unless it's sort of a cataclysmic event that occurs. But like generally speaking, you would see that, quite a long ways away. And then if we wanted to, we could like, all right, well, we noticed this particular design it's not working 100% the way we thought it was going to work out. So we can introduce the concept of an interest rate to better protect the network from an inflation scenario, right? So we can adjust as we need to. I wanted to start with the approach, the design that is the best, most perfect loan we could possibly even think or dream of in some sense, and start with the best case scenario. And then if we find that it's just not working out the way we thought, then we can, maybe add an interest rate or something like this.
I'm curious what Khan's opinion is on extending lending past the barrier of like how much Bitcoin is in the pool, because that's something that Chad talks about. But that's the thing it's difficult for a lot of us to wrap our head around. Like basically like having a greater liability than the current depth of the pool. And obviously like the pool can get more assets, but that scenario, yeah, I'm just curious to hear your thoughts and opinions on extending lending past the barriers of the pool.
Can actually one of you walk me through it? What is the current limitation? I'm actually not fully aware of the situation.
The limitation on lending?
Yeah.
So the limitation on lending is just by setting how fast the CR grows, right? And eventually the CR grows so high that nobody's willing to take out any new loans.
Right.
That becomes there's nothing actually stopping anybody from opening up more loans. The question is it worthwhile deal? And at some point it's not, right? At some point,
yeah.
The network will swap your BDC that you give us into derived asset BDC and hold it within the network. So you can check the wallet of the lending protocol at any given moment, see how much derived BDC it has, how much derived Ether it has, how much derived Atom or whatever, and you can figure out like, oh, here's the total amount of collateral that the network has in derived asset. This is like, and you can calculate this and say, oh, there's 2,000 BDC and there's 10,000 Ether and there's da 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 da. And you can do the math and calculate, well, if I were to swap all this derived asset into the layer ones, how much Rune would we have to be minted, right, to do that thing? And so I think what Cow is pointing at is that there could be a confusion amongst the industry that thinks that what's backing the loan collateral is the pool, which is not the case. It's the derived asset that the lending protocol is holding, right? And so there's a concern that people will panic and freak out that the thing has become insolvent. In reality, it's not, but because they're confused on the mechanisms of how this thing actually works. They're like, oh no, there's not enough layer one BDC in the pool to back the 10,000, Thor BDC that exists, blah, blah, blah. Insolvency, and freak out. Even though it's not the case.
Okay.
This is what's funny to me is like, if we're arguing about this design in a way that we're not arguing about the design anymore, we're arguing about people not understanding the design, we're probably in a good place.
Yeah, well, I'm still trying to understand the design. Like, I feel like I try and think about this very often, and I feel like I'm still trying to, like, I'm approaching the understanding of it, but I'm not like, to where like I can say like I completely understand all of the okay, so the lending protocol actually holds derived assets in a separate vault, or is it just I mean, I guess it doesn't matter whether it's the liability or whether it actually holds those derived assets. Yeah. But maybe you can explain that part a little bit better. On like basically how that's all accounted.
Yeah, it's just a wallet effectively with no private key that the network itself owns. Nobody can transact with it. It's a wallet, right? It's a Thor address in effect that has no private key, and so that's just going to be a wallet that's just going to be like the interim holder of the derived assets, all the collateral that the network has, and then once you close it, you get some of that collateral back, depending on the amount your debt you repaid and all these kind of things. So it's just sitting there just for accounting purposes, really. That's what it was there for.
Like, however, like back to basics, but like every collateral deposited in order to mint, in order to like borrow, mm-hmm. right? It remains in the pool.
Yeah,
and so the pool should grow as lenders pile in.
Not really, just because the collateral is always the derived asset. You might send us in layer one BDC, but from the lender receives the derived asset that you swap to, and that becomes their collateral. So you're gonna add layer one BDC into the pool, so you're gonna increase the quantity of BDC. You're gonna take out Rune from the pool, so you're decreasing the quantity of Rune.
Right.
The value of the pool in general is basically the same. It's increased slightly from the swap fee that was collected, but generally the same value. And then the Rune gets burnt and then mints the derived asset. and then that fee gets burned forever. Whatever that fee is there gets forever burned. From the.
Got it. So okay, so what I'm saying isn't true because you're not actually taking a loan out on the native asset. Similar to how synths aren't actually earning yield on a layer one asset, what you're actually doing is earning yield on a synthetic asset. This is actually taking a loan out on a derived asset, but you're originating with the native layer one asset, which is
right.
It's similar in it's like a parallel to savers.
Right.
Into like how we describe what is happening versus what is like actually happening with the protocol. And I think that's kind of like sort of it's not the problem, but it's just like the disconnect versus like what we say the feature is and what we try to design the feature to be like and mimic versus like what's actually happening on the protocol. Because like we say a lot like, oh yeah, native assets, but like all these things that are being done, like savers, isn't yield on the actual native asset. It's just using that native asset to earn yield in the synthetic asset, which is redeemable for the native asset.
Right.
So it's like at the base level, it's the same thing, but it's so like that's why I'm just trying to clear this up and like understand it better for myself, because like other people are going to have the same confusion times 50 and be thinking that it's something that it's not, because it's the simpler way to understand it. So that's just kind of why I'm trying to clear this up.
Right.
So I'm also still a bit in the middle here, and just a question on that though is because you say that their like lending is separate from the pool, right? Like it doesn't. Where I can't follow that is like I get it like on the first step, right? Like yeah, it's actually the derived asset, but isn't the reality that then the rune is going to get minted and that's going to get swapped in the pool and native Bitcoin is going to get taken out of the pool, right?
Correct.
Like the loan closer has the exact same goal as the saver panicker, and that is to redeem for native Bitcoin out of the pool.
Right.
So that's why I don't understand how you say they're like fully separate. I mean, I understand like mechanistically they're separate, but to me it just seems like they both still have that same goal of take native Bitcoin out of the liquidity pool.
They do, but the difference is that once somebody closes their loan, takes native Bitcoin out of the Bitcoin pool, the Bitcoin comes right back in because arbitrage bots swap Bitcoin to Rune and do the inverse trade effectively. And so like
and does that hold up when you're like minting new Rune? I mean, because I guess arbs are really complicated and really confusing, because if you're minting Rune and adding it in, is the arb always there, or could the Rune price just absorb the downside?
No, the arb is always there.
I think the key here is that when you exit, you only exit with Bitcoin only and like not Rune.
Right.
Like in like regular LP, you exit like both of them, and so the pool shrinks. But here in this scenario, you would only exit with only one side, and so all of the rest of the pools will remain the same. And so like arbitrage, if it functions well, it should fill in that gap.
Technically, the pool gets deeper each time this happens, just because of the swap fee that's taken out of the Rune to layer one BTC trade that's happening, right? So the LPs and the savers are making an income each time this happens, and the pool's actually getting deeper and more valuable. And like the number of BTC, it does not actually decrease once arbitrage comes in and puts it back in.
Yeah, but this is definitely hard to like wrap your head around. Like I need to write another THORChain report.
Please.
As this product like is gets close to launch. I really want to dive in. And to me, like I think there are missing pieces. Like some others, definitely.
Well, if you have more pieces, give them to us, because I'd be happy to hear about them.
What?
Sorry. Go ahead.
How is on that note? How is the timeline? Like, I wonder.
In terms of
how's the time? I know you guys are prioritizing this, but and like giving timings on these is super hard. But yeah.
Yeah, the code's already written, right? It's already done. We might need to make some tweaks and changes. We might need to fix some bugs and such, but the code is there. There's 3 PRs that are currently open that I'm waiting for the Nine Realms team and THORsec to review and eventually merge. And then once that happens, we would basically enable the feature on StageNet, right, where we could start doing some kind of messing around and testing and experimentation with it. And then once we feel confident about it, we would actually go ahead and launch it on mainnet, with limitations. And then, we'll be raising the caps in a sense. What timing? Like, I'm hoping it'll be Q1 when we launch it on mainnet. That's my intention, but it's outside of my I did my job, which is, come up with some of the concepts of it and writing the code and delivering it. Now the rest is up for just testing and validation.
Yeah, when you say like I'm ready or something like that, that always reminds me of this like amazing meme of like the movie meme. Anyways, I realized I'm not going to be able to explain it, but there was a very funny there's a very funny meme of yours, like pushing everyone, saying like we're ready, like we can push the code and something like that. But anyways.
Yeah. Well, if you have any more questions, please let me know because I'd be happy to answer them.
Yeah, no, definitely. I want to dive into like really dig into numbers and everything. Mm-hmm. And we'll definitely do it at some point, and we'll reach out. Of course.
Oh, and by the way, like when you were talking about net inflation of Rune in some scenarios, like similar to Synths, and you were saying about Synths many moons ago, that it's asymmetric on the network side because the act of entering and the act of closing a loan, gives you less of your asset of return. Like if you put in 1 Bitcoin as your collateral, you'll never get 1 Bitcoin back, 1 full Bitcoin back as your collateral because there's swap fees on the inbound and the swap fees on the outbound, right? And so there's always kind of like an asymmetric on the network's side, right?
I mean, that, and plus, if you look at like liabilities versus realized like liabilities, like because there will always be people currently like borrowed and haven't paid their loan, like probably will be net deflationary, like for the most part, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
What was the case with the if Rune inflates? What was the backstop there? I know the supply kind of is still capped.
Yeah.
Right?
So we had this idea of doing a circuit breaker because I think a lot of people like the idea of the supply, the monetary supply of a monetary policy of Rune being 500 million be kept there. And it helps us to kind of combat some fears of like terror, blah, 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 bullshit. But so they want to have a circuit breaker, right? That we can't mint beyond the 500 million. So initially the idea was, okay, if we just don't mint back over 500 million. So if you have an open loan and we hit that 500 cap, then you're shit out of luck and you basically can't close your loan anymore, which sucks for you, right? That was the initial concept of the circuit breaker. The second version of it, which I like better, is that we say, no, you can go ahead and close your loan, but instead of minting more Rune, we're just going to take Rune from the reserve, which has about 35 or 40% of whatever the hell the number is of the total supply of Rune in its entirety. Just so that we make good on the promise that if you open your loan, you can close it and get your collateral back. And there's no, the one thing we can't allow to happen with lending, the most important thing in my view, is we cannot create doubt that you will not be able to close your loan and get your collateral back.
Yeah, that's a no-brainer. That's a no-go for
right.
sure. For me, though, I don't know if this is a contrarian take. I generally think it's much cleaner and neater design if like we let supply of Rune be like fluctuate without any caps whatsoever. I think generally like this decision comes up to like optics, making people like comfortable.
Right. It is.
But in reality, it doesn't change the result really. Like if the reserve gets drained, like too bad, right? Like now we need to think about like whether we should mint new rune to like make a great reset and move on or something like that. But
yeah, but in reality,
yeah.
the math works out that the difference between just minting beyond the 500 cap and taking from the reserve is that instead of increasing the supply of rune, you're borrowing from future yield, right? Because you're reducing the yield that the LPs make and the nodes make, blah, 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 and you're basically borrowing on the future yield in some sense. It's purely an optics thing. If I had my way, I would just do what you're saying and just not have a max supply cap on rune anymore, if it was up to me. But to be honest, like in my view, that this is all kind of a moot conversation, just because I don't think we'll ever get close to the 500 supply, to be honest.
I said the heart.
Does anyone from the audience have questions and want to come up and ask about THORFi? Really anything. Like, we're kind of pretty deep in the weeds here, but even if it's just some basics, this is a good time to come up and ask your questions.
Yeah, one of the things I'm hoping this actually happens from this, that people may be even thinking about, is that just while people are raising their hands, is that Binance has a lot of rune in it, right? It's a lot of users' deposits. Not Binance doesn't have a lot of rune, but it's holding user deposits of a lot of rune. And I would love to see this feature just kind of start sucking that rune out, right? Just by creating so much buy pressure that all that rune that leaves Binance and then more of a higher percentage of the rune supply is inside the network in one form or another. That's what I'm hoping happens.
Yeah, they have a lot of rune. I think they have like 55 million rune or something like that in total. Like, it's quite a lot.
Yeah.
And seeing it all go to the network eventually is something I'm very much looking forward to.
Yeah. Yep.
Either the bond or the pools.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Binance doesn't run any nodes or anything. I don't think they've ever mentioned anything like that as far as you know, right?
Or not. Like, I'm not aware of it, if they're running any nodes or not. I hope they would. They have a bunch of rune. They should.
Yeah, right.
Why not? But it's usually it becomes like it's not their rune. It's user deposits, right? So that it's questionable what they they can't just take that rune and just dump it on the market or something like this. Any questions from the audience?
No one requested to come up.
Really? That'd be a first time I've seen that, I think.
Maybe a lot of people know the THORFi design pretty well at this point.
Yeah, there's just really no questions about it whatsoever.
So like, people have to realize that this whole design, this whole concept is just completely novel. Right, like no one, I don't, to my knowledge, and Cam, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but like nobody's ever done anything remotely close to this concept before. It's completely new, completely novel, and if it works, it's going to be one of the most like significant contributions to DeFi we've had in many years. So I'm hoping that it works. I think that it works. I'm a smart guy, but I'm not infallible, right? And so I could be wrong, and that's why we kind of have these open conversations amongst the community, amongst people like Can and this kind of thing, so people can voice their perspectives and want to see it happen or want to see it not happen, right? But in the end, I think it's worthwhile trying it out and experimenting and see how it works.
Brought up Awakening Humanity. Hey,
yeah. So I'm also just trying to wrap my head around that. So maybe for layman's terms, if you can explain it that way, maybe. Let me put it this way. So let's just say I'm getting over collateralized. With Luna, that happened where, once we hit a certain, what is it? The collateral, liquidation point, you get liquidated, and that's it. So with the THORFi, if I'm understanding this correctly, you're saying that you cannot get liquidated whatsoever, right? So is it like an endless loop essentially? Where, okay, in the bull market, I'm taking out whatever $50,000, and I'm buying more Bitcoin, and until the music stops, essentially, is that a way? Do I understand that correctly? And is there any downside with that, if that's so?
Well, yeah. I mean, what you're describing is you're basically 3x longing your Bitcoin position using these lending design to kind of like have a leveraged position on Bitcoin. You can totally do that, and there's no liquidation. So
Wow.
you never lose that Bitcoin, even in a bear market, right? You may not be able to access that Bitcoin during the bear market because it just wouldn't make sense to do it. But once the market goes full again, a few years later, whatever that is, and Bitcoin's price is now at $150,000, then you can go ahead and pay back your loan and get your BTC back.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. So let me ask you this. So let's say, I'm requesting whatever, $50,000, and thousands of other people are doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Where is the USDC or USDT coming from?
You mean the debt that you're receiving?
Yes, because THORFi gives out that 50,000 USDC if I'm requesting USDC, right? Or is it only BTC? I forgot. But where is that coming from, and where's the limit, or is it unlimited?
So it's coming from the lending protocol itself. So you're giving the network 10,000 rune worth of Bitcoin, for example. We burn that 10,000, or maybe another way to think about it. We burn half of it, and then we swap the other half to USDC, and then sending that USDC on the other side. So the network is net burns 5,000 rune from the supply of network, from the supply of the network. Yeah.
So 50% of Bitcoin is getting sold, yes, to USDC.
Sort of, yeah. You can kind of think of it. This 50% number is based on what your CR is. So if you have 2% CR, that's 50% that you're talking about. If it's 300%, lower than that, so forth and so on. So if you have thousands of people doing this, the CR is probably going to get really high really fast because the demand is there.
Which means, what does that mean when the CR is really high? What does it mean?
It means that instead of getting 50%, of your collateral, you get 30% or 20% or 10% or 5%, depending upon.
Oh, I see. So it's less and less and less, essentially.
Right. The more popular feature, the more loans that are being put out, the less you get back per BTC.
Okay. Well, why can't it just stay at, let's say, 30%? Why is it continuously getting lower if THORFi continuously sells half of it? How come it constantly increases? Because is there any incentive for people to do it if it's only 5%?
No, there's not. That's the point.
Yeah.
That's the stop, right? That's the ending where people will open up more loans. It's the way we control this feature from not being going bananas day one. We want to scale it slowly, right?
Well, what is the determining factor? Who controls it? Is it I believe it's in a code, or are you saying, oh no, 10 billion is enough and we're stopping the music now? Or who determines that? How is that determined?
For the network itself, so the validators.
Got it.
Yeah, so we kind of discussed this a little bit before, where the validators for the network will all vote on what the maximum collateralization ratio is and what the maximum amount of debt we want for the pools. So when the amount of debt approaches that maximum, it'll also approach the maximum collateralization ratio for a new loan. And when people pay off their loans and that goes down, then the collateralization ratio also dips to encourage more people to take loans out. So it just seeks to find that highest possible collateralization ratio where things are kind of in balance at a market rate.
Yeah.
If you go back and listen to the recording, we kind of went into it a bit there, but THORFi is a completely different design. So definitely check out the design on GitLab.
You can't have take Bitcoin for example. You can't have static gas cost for Bitcoin. You couldn't just say, to transfer one UTXO, it's some static number. Instead, you need to do it based upon market demand, because there'll be more market demand now and less market demand later. And so you always need something to kind of be like a pendulum that swings to make things more expensive or less expensive, and just reacting to the demand of that feature. So we want to make sure this actually has a supply, it has a demand, and by the swing of both of those things together, it determines what the CR is going to be.
Oh, okay. So it doesn't start off with like 50% or anything. Everything is determined by the validators, yeah?
The validators determine the configuration of the math, but not the math itself, sort of, if that makes sense.
Okay, what does it start out with when you launch?
That hasn't been determined yet. There's debates around whether it should start low or start high and then inch down lower or whatever. That hasn't been determined quite yet. We still need to figure an answer, but we know what the levers are, we know what the configurations are, and it's a question of like, what do we want to set the minimum, the maximum, and then the quantity of the pool, whether it be half that one size of the pool or 2x the pool or whatever. That needs to be determined later on by validators.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. I have to say, maybe that is the answer what Celsius and Luna and all of them we're trying to do unsuccessfully. Right.
I actually met with one of the guys from, which one was it? It was not BlockFi. It was Celsius. I met with one of the Celsius guys, and I told him about our savings and lending design, and he was shocked by it. He told me at the time, his face turned almost white, and he said, "Oh, so you guys are doing everything that we're doing, just decentralized?" And I said, "Yeah, exactly."
Wow, that's amazing. I'm really excited. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for the question, man. All right, so to follow up on like what I was saying earlier about how lenders is kind of akin to saving, as in you're not actually saving or lending the layer one asset, you're actually lending and saving the synth and derived asset. So does it actually pose any risk to is it because of the LTVs that doesn't pose any risk to the actual liquidity providers? Because the hard stop here is we need the liquidity providers in the network to continue to provide liquidity and provide their Bitcoin to the network so other people can lend and borrow and trade and do whatever. So does lending in your opinion cause any additional risk to them where they might not have their Bitcoin or to savers or to the other stakeholders in the network other than rune holders?
Yeah. So the LPs and the savers, they don't really care too much about lending. They're not exposed. If lending completely bombs, right? In a matter of speaking, the LPs don't really give a shit, right? Or the savers don't really give a shit. It doesn't really affect them at all. It's almost like it's like if I was selling tickets to like a high school basketball team, right? Like the pools are used to get in and out of lending. They're used to and they pay money to the LPs and the savers to do so.
Right, because you're just swapping for a derived asset, so you're not actually affecting the balance of the pool itself.
So it's almost like if you had a high school basketball game and there's like a $5 entry charge to go watch the game, right? And the LPs are like the admission, right? They're charging you to get to go watch the game, right? Or to come out of the game. Like you're paying on the way in, you're paying on the way out. But whether or not the home team wins or the away team wins or whatever happens within the context of that game, the person charging for admission doesn't really give two shits, right? They still made their money. They don't care if the home team wins or the away team wins. They still win, right? Because they get the admission, they get the $5 to enter, and they pay another $5 to leave, or whatever the hell it is. But what happens within the context of the game, they don't really care. They're not really exposed to it. So LPs, in a matter of speaking, are that. Now, if you want to get very technical about it, the inflation of Rune or the deflation of Rune, dual side LPs will care because that will cause Rune's price to go up or down. So there's kind of more of an indirect relationship because they're exposed to the Rune price, and what happens with lending can affect the Rune price. But from a more directional perspective, they're not really involved at all.
Okay, so that is probably a major point of clarification, and that's probably one of the major points of confusion from someone trying to understand the whole lending design. So like, all right, let's picture this. It's June, THORFi is released, and you're on CNBC, and someone's asking you like, do the liquidity providers have any risk from THORFi, from their collateral being lent out? Now, like, I don't think I think you'd say that's false. But what is your like answer to that? Like,
Well,
to the layman who might not who doesn't really understand this like as deeply.
Right, but the LP is not having their collateral be lent out because they're being compensated. It's not like you put up your ether and then somebody sends the ether out and there's less ether in the network. You're putting up your ether and then people are just trading it, swapping for it. It's the same as what you did today. Like there's no difference from the LP perspective of what's happening in the pool now versus after lending. All they know is that people are putting in one asset, Rune, and they're taking out ether. They're putting in ether. They're taking out Rune. It's the same thing. Like to them, it's no different. It's just actually for the LP, they like it because now there's going to be a higher trade volume in the pools because there's people opening and closing their loans. It's just going to create more natural, volume of trades. It's just increasing their yield in a sense, right? But in the end, like their liquidity that they put into the network is not being used for loans. It's not being lent out to other people or any of these things. It's being bought and then being sent out to other people, but you're being compensated for it. You're not just sending it out.
Right, because the lender is the network itself, because they're actually being lent a derived asset, which is then being swapped to a layer one asset.
Yeah, the network is the network is holding their derived asset on their behalf, right? Holding their collateral, holding the value of their collateral, which is that derived asset, and then when you return, pay down your debt with whatever quantity of coins that needed to do so, you get your collateral back minus swap fees.
Cool. Thanks for answering those questions. I feel like every time I just feel like I just learn, I just inch a little bit closer to like getting that more full understanding. So like this is helpful because like all of us do have the duty to like understand this deeply and like understand exactly how things work. And I do feel more confident that I understand how LPs aren't the ones that are lending.
Right.
It's the protocol itself that's actually making the loan.
What's interesting is that
and taking the risk.
The original THORFi design that we launched like a year ago, or documented a year ago for public comment, that the savers and the lending design within that original concept is that the savers needed the lending needed the savers to achieve each other's goals. And so you couldn't have one without the other. They kind of required both sides of the coin in order for them both to accomplish what they offer, the service that they offer. What's different about the newer design is that the saving and the lending are not correlated or connected the way that it was in the original THORFi design. And so if one does very well and the other one just completely fails, the other one doesn't really give two shits. It doesn't even matter much to them.
Would anyone else like to come up and speak? Otherwise, we can get wrapped up soon.
I'd like to just bring in new color to the discussion before we close. One of my personal goals this year is basically to learn more about privacy, basically how these technologies work and everything. So I'm tipping my toes on that sense, and I can tell from a very initial look that like programmable privacy is like extremely hard. Like making blockchains both programmable and private is extremely hard, and there's like a lot of privacy projects out there. But one of the biggest like fundamental problems is that is the anonymity set. So like the more people participate in the privacy protocol, the more privacy you get usually, like as a general like look. And so like for things like Aztec and everything, like they're really cool projects. However, like if there's not many people using them, you don't get privacy. So where I'm getting at is basically like I think Monero is in a great spot to offer privacy, on-chain privacy for users, because it has a lot of liquidity. It has a very large community and whatnot. And then I really like the direction where THORChain was going with Haven and Monero integrations and whatnot. And now like landing is, I know, prioritized. Privacy is I still believe it will, like THORChain will support it. Just see how you guys think about it at this point, how chat thinks about it.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. Like, privacy is a very difficult thing to accomplish. And the type of privacy we have now, when we talk about privacy versus like privacy in the 1990s, is that before we were talking about encryption. Usually it's just like typically a shared secret approach, which that type of privacy is actually very good and very effective. And it's very hard to break that stuff. The privacy we have now, where it's basically just a big mixer or kind of shuffling things and that kind of stuff. Like, you're right, the more transactions there are, the more privacy there effectively is, or the more difficult it is to kind of unwind what's occurring or transpiring. And the vast majority of privacy networks we feel like we have today are not that private. I'm willing to bet that many governments probably have already broken THOReau Cash, for example, right? That doesn't have the volume to really be as effective as people think that it is. It's fine if you want to, like, if you're just trying to buy a hot dog and you don't want the hot dog stand guy to know how much ether you have in your address or something like this. It's fine, right? You can do that, and you can use THOReau for that purpose. If you're trying to like launder money or do something on a much larger scale, then I don't think any of these tools are really all that effective, to be honest with you. And this is my 2 cents. So people should not treat them as like ways of hiding information from governments, because I'm pretty sure they can probably break all these things. Monero is probably the best one, and that's probably the hardest one to break. And I agree with you, which is one of the reasons why I would love to see Monero interface with THORChain, not only because it has privacy, but we as a community would contribute to the privacy of Monero by having more transactions, right? Increasing the quantity of transactions they have per day on their network. So I would love to see that happen, and I would advocate for it.
Yeah, I totally think that's like a very, very like unique competitive advantage that THORChain can bring into the table. Like, in addition to like, I see it as the biggest competitive advantage to be as a way to permissionlessly like swap Bitcoin to Ethereum and back, and Ethereum meaning Ether and stables. Obviously, other chains are also important, but I think generally less so. But like, Monero is definitely one of the top ones. Like, if in an alternative space, THORChain was only supporting Monero, Bitcoin, and Ethereum, I'd be like super happy with it. Like, I think that's where the competitive edge kind of lies. So definitely want to see that happen sooner rather than later.
Con, I'm curious your perspective on like that in the context of where the network is today, and is the network ready for it in terms of decentralization, where the nodes are located, how many nodes there are, even front ends, just like regulatory kind of attack vectors and stuff like that. Because I think everyone in the community is aligned on the ideological part of supporting privacy chains. I think the controversial part is, does it threaten the entire network as it stands today? So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, like I'm just let's say a rune holder and community member. I think like more important people here are definitely validators, who can be potentially attacked, right? And so like their votes matter definitely more, I feel like. However, I should note that like when people think about privacy, they usually think about like regulatory pressure. However, like if you look at like Web 2, right? Like even banking system is pretty private to an extent, right? Like it's definitely more private than on-chain transactions where everybody sees everything at all times forever, right? Even if you make a single transaction with someone, that person can see all of your transactions in the historically, and all your transactions in the future. So that's definitely way less private than how things work in Web 2. And so like my point is that like just adding privacy, like just giving people ability to like decide what kind of which parts of their like financial transactions they want to disclose or not, is basically opens up new use cases, on-chain use cases. I think that it just grows the industry a lot. So it's not just about like individual like freedom or like freedom to transact and whatnot, but if we can bring like more privacy, just a bit better than the current state, we can have like way more use cases in DeFi in like the whole space. So it's definitely not binary. It's definitely not realistic for like governments to continue to demand, oh, everything should be completely transparent at all times. Like that's definitely not realistic, and that's definitely not how I see the space will evolve into. So I totally expect some level of privacy on chain for sure. In Tornado Cash, I think the primary thing was that like North Korea hacker group was just like laundering it, and it was so evident, and that was the reaction. However, like banning all privacy is just like nonsense. So I think people are very like people immediately think like, oh, like regulatory pressure will be huge, but like if you look at it, like even regulation like requires some sort of privacy in Web 2, like enforces it actually. Like you cannot, for example, like give out your users, customers' data, and so there's like data protection regulations and whatnot. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
Yeah, great points. I agree. I mean, there's so many use cases for privacy, and I definitely think it's like such an important area beyond just like the ideological reasons, but also just like you said, just opens up so many use cases. The concern is just that THORChain becomes seen as Tornado Cash, or kind of gets like lumped into the same category if hackers and stolen funds or whatever is using it to get it in and out of Monero, and then you have the problem of are the pools like tainted funds, things like that. Obviously going after validators, but I'm hopeful that it kind of pans out the way that you're describing, and I think it'd be great.
Yeah, I'm approaching like I totally understand. I totally understand the concerns. Although, like the thing I'm after is like we want businesses, like real economy, to do more transactions with crypto, right? Like businesses aren't going to use crypto if like this landscape doesn't change. Like we definitely need solutions here, for sure. But like I said, it's ultimately like more important what validator thinks and how they feel about it, basically.
I think the one thing people should like think about, at least the one thing I do, is like the idea of adding Monero for me is it makes sense from a rights perspective, right? Privacy, we should have the right to privacy, for example. And this is like something that I'm just willing to kind of fight over, right? Like this is something that if the government wants to challenge our ability to have private transactions using Monero or otherwise, then I say let's have that argument, let's have that debate, let's have that our day in court, or so forth and so on. Like Tornado Cash is now going through their own legal process to challenge the OFAC thing and all that kind of stuff. Like this is something we should really fight for, right? And clarify and force the government to clarify that, like, no, we actually do have the right to privacy. So even if we add Monero and it does become a problem and the government does a cease and desist or writes some sort of memo, blah, 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 whatever, then the entire crypto industry, not just the THORChain, but the entire industry would, like Brian Armstrong would probably put a lot of money into, fighting, challenging the whatever ruling that came out or memo that came out. Same thing with like Coin Center and other places too. So like they would just open up a hornet's nest that I would be happy to fight with to prove through a legal process that we have the right to privacy and that we don't need to have every transaction be public and knowable by the federales.
Yeah,
I
that
don't know
also
if
makes
you've
me.
seen, Chad. Oh, sorry. The other day on the 9th, Tom Emmer got a response from the Department of the Treasury just regarding the whole OFAC designation for Tornado Cash, and one of the things that they mentioned was so this is a quote directly from the letter to Tom Emmer from the Department of the Treasury, and it says OFAC has not designated Tornado Cash as individual founders, developers, members of the DAO, or users, or other persons involved in supporting Tornado Cash at this time. However, all Tornado Cash property and interests in property are blocked, and U.S. persons cannot transact with Tornado Cash or deal in its property and interest in property absent authorization from OFAC. So, which is an interesting pivot from where they were in July, in that it's specifically only blocking the Tornado Cash organization and its property, and not the individual founders, developers, members of the DAO, or users or other people that support Tornado Cash. Just the organization itself, however you would mark that, which is an interesting change of stance.
Right, and that's. To be honest, we shouldn't be afraid of the government. What we're doing is going to piss off the government, and we're going to do it because we believe in what we're doing. If we're afraid of the government coming at us, then I don't know what you're doing here. This is part of the battle is going to be fighting government at some point in time through illegal procedures or new laws that are being created by SBF or whatever about regulating this or that or front ends or really how they're trying to do whatever. They're going to do something. And whatever the fuck it's going to be, and whatever it is that we as a community have to fight against them, and we should continue to do things that we feel is right for us as individuals and as a community, and fight for the things that we think are the things we should fight for. And privacy for me is one of those things.
It does bring back up that conversation of potential THORChain forks, and maybe that's a future of THORChain, where there's many different THORChains that have different focuses. Because in this context, it does change the risk profile for everyone involved in a sense, right? It changes it for it definitely changes it for node operators, especially. I would say it also changes it for LPs, and it even changes it for holders if they feel the whole project's going to get attacked and shut down by the government or whatever. So I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't know if any of us can predict the future exactly how that's going to play out, but whether it's the single THORChain or whether it's a privacy THORChain that then can isolate the risk yet still interact with THORChain through aggregation. There's different ways this could play out, but one way or another, it's going to happen, which is the important part.
Cool. Let's get these last two audience members. Let's get their questions answered, and then we can wrap up. Thanks for your input, for everything, Con. Great having you on the space today, by the way. Let's start with K Coefficient.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Hey.
Hey, I was just looking at a few days ago. I know Chad THOReau knows about this, but I was kind of mind blowing at the volume that the DYDX does, and I know that they have their own chain now. It's Tendermint chain. So I was just wondering, is it even possible to consider looking at DYDX chain as a possible integration for perps? I know that it's a perp chain, so. And they have off-chain order books and everything. I don't know how close you've looked at that, Chad. If at all. I don't know if that's totally crazy thinking on my part or what.
DYDX's volume is kind of inflated because of the
I'm sure it's all leverage.
So it's I wouldn't take their volume at face value necessarily, but. I don't know if there's an integration there or not, to be honest with you. There's been talks in the past about doing perps on THORChain directly, and there's even one design that's written up on one in GitLab, which personally I'm not a particularly huge fan of personally. So it's an approach, but I think there's problems with that design that I think would be an issue. But there's no interest that I have right now with the DYDX at the current moment. But if the community wants to integrate later, they can, whatever that might look like or be.
Yeah, no problem. I just didn't know if it was even technically possible or.
It is possible because you can create pools on there and then make swaps and such. It is definitely possible. I don't know how that would work or whatever. Like I'd have to work with their team, and their team would work with our team and figure out something.
Right.
But
if there's people that are very familiar with DYDX, that's probably the way to figure out how DYDX could best interact with THORChain, because I'm sure a lot of us just don't have the time to like really like sit down and like figure out everything that DYDX does. But I'm sure that there are people here that are avid users of DYDX and like know a lot about their protocol and how it works. I don't think is their chain actually released already? I thought it was coming out like later this year. I'm not actually sure, but
yeah, I don't think so yet.
Yeah. All right.
That I don't know.
I think it was supposed to be like Q2 or something. Or maybe
Version
Q3
4
this year.
was V4 was announced last June, and that's all I know. So.
Yeah, cool. So, like, if people are familiar and like just come up with a vision of like what you think that like how could THORChain interact with DYDX, and like that's how we could go to the DYDX team to approach them about integration. It's like we could just go up and say like, hey, let's integrate, but then they're going to be like, all right, well, why would we want to do that? But if people have like actual like product ideas and things that can be built on top of it, and like things, especially things that obviously benefit like DYDX and THORChain, like something like having some kind of native settlement ramp to Bitcoin, assuming they do like Bitcoin perps, right? Like something like that might be attractive to their users. So like that's the type of angle that I think of when it comes to like how to sell the integration / aggregation aspect of it. Is like, how can you make both teams win? Like, is it an easy integration? And like, how big is that win, especially for the other team, because they need to make a lot of time and effort to put THORChain on their roadmap, right? Not just us. So
yeah.
If people have ideas, like definitely like brainstorm, like use the products.
I was just thinking like, well, if people were talking about perps and THORChain and like like why not just use the best high volume perp protocols out there? So. But I don't know if it was even technically possible. So.
Yeah, we also touched on earlier, like, maybe it's a protocol somewhere, like using TC synthetics externally, right? And I have a quick follow-up on the same topic for you, Chad, is like, to you, does it make sense to have perps on THORChain directly? Or like, is it just better that this is built externally and has like a settle to native feature, like Hal was saying? Because I've been thinking how, I don't really use perps much, though. I'm not the expert on it, but I'm pretty sure, don't you usually like start with a stable coin, go into your perp long or short, and then basically settle back to a stable coin, right? So I've been thinking, is there that much value in, like, does it matter that it's native assets in that case? Like, obviously, yes, there's still risks while you're in the position of like, whether it's wrapped or we could talk about like wrapped versus synthetic and like how those risks are not exactly the same. But does it matter that much to the user if they had like a settle to native stable coin at the end of their trade? And yeah, I don't know. Does it make sense to have it on THORChain? What do you think?
Well, for me, when I'm thinking about what should and should not be on THORChain, I think about what drives value to the liquidity pools and what doesn't. Right. The only goal we have, in some sense, is to create these liquidity pools, continuous liquidity pools, and drive value to them, right? Through depth and swaps and all this kind of stuff. So that's what I think about. So when we talk about doing something like composites, for example, which or like an ETF or index like concepts, like I'm not entirely sure that actually drives a lot of value into the liquidity pools. It probably would drive some, but maybe not a lot. Perps, on the other hand, can be a highly profitable thing or create a lot of volume on the network because of those perps, right? So if we did do it, we would just drive more trade volume onto the layer one pools, and so the LPs and savers just get higher income, which would cause them to, more LPs to come, more savers to come, pools get deeper, so forth and so on. So that's the reason to do it, is that it just drives more value to the pools and gets more trade volume on the network. That's really the only reason to do it, if you ask me, rather than doing that as an external.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Or you could do it and say we're gonna have IBC enabled, and we're going to do derived. We're going to enable derived assets and make it a publicly available feature that anybody can acquire a derived asset, and then beam that derived asset over, the IBC to DYDX land. And so that's going to create some trade volume in layer one pools, also create some burning of rune as well. And also, and so you're gonna see a buying, a burning of rune, which could cause a rune price to go up, but also you get to utilize DYDX and use perps and these other things. But in the interim, we're just burning more rune from the network, which is obviously good for the rune price, which causes security to go up, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess just driving trade volume is like the obvious win. What I was kind of hung up on is just like, is it most of the things THORChain does are like so unique to THORChain itself. Like THORChain can only do it, right? And this started to feel like, I guess that is what it is. It's just a way of driving more volume, which benefits the whole thing. So
is your question like, would we approach perps differently than how everybody else generally approaches perps?
Well, I did read that GitLab, and yeah, it seemed a bit crazy, and for something like perps, to me, it felt like I'm not sure it makes sense to add like another crazy THORFi sort of thing to achieve perps when perps like can already exist and they already do exist elsewhere, and it's not something that THORChain is like specifically able to do. Like you can have perps elsewhere, right? So it kind of didn't make sense to introduce all that risk for when it could be external to me.
I mean, the thing that we would be different than other perps providers like DYDX, for example, is that we would support layer one assets, right? In effect, right? Like what makes us so unique than there are other DeFi platform out there is that we're chain agnostic, and so that has value there. Just like being able to take your Bitcoin and get an loan in your Bitcoin, like that is a significant contribution to the Bitcoin space, right? And we would see the same thing here of having perps on assets that don't really have perps, other than using wrapped assets or some sort of like nomic thing or something like this.
Yeah, I get that. I just wonder, like, do you care as much in this context when you're in like a trade? Like you go from a stable coin into like a BTC 5x long, and then you close it to a stable coin. Like that's how most people use perps, right? Like they don't go from like Bitcoin to long to Bitcoin. I mean, maybe they do, but yeah,
right. I mean, personally, I care less about perps just because I'm not interested in building tools for advanced traders personally. This seems like it's not worth my time. Other people can build it if they want to, but I can see the value of doing perps because it would just drive a lot more trade volume to the pool. So that's a good thing. But like the problem with perps that I have, or one of the problems I have with perps, is because of the leverage aspect to it. Price manipulation in a profitable way might be possible or practical to execute, where you can't do that with lending because lending is not utilizing leverage, and so it becomes unprofitable to attack the network from price manipulation. But if you're exposing yourself to 10x leverage or 100x leverage, then it might be profitable to manipulate the pool price and walk away with a bunch of extra money and exploit the system.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at from that angle. Like, how could THORChain have perps and kind of have the risk externally on another chain, another protocol?
And the answer is just using another protocol. It's just using DYDX and then having the link to THORChain somehow. So it's like it's a great idea for sure. And I mean, like that's THORChain's future, is just hooking into these other protocols, and it's just like figuring out like exactly how to do that and like the time and place to make those connections.
Yeah,
Pluto would crush me anyway. So I was just kind of dreaming there. So just for me personally
though, like I'm not really for perps in this particular moment, just because I haven't seen a design or implementation that makes sense to me or provides a significant amount of value to the protocol. That doesn't mean I'm close to it to the future if we come up with a different idea or concept. But as of right now, from what I've understood, like it's not something that I'm pushing for or advocating for.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks, kid.
Yeah, good question.
All right, one last question. Let's go to Mohammed. Hey.
Hey, starting community THORChain from India. I hope you all will support me, guys.
Yeah, do you have are you like running a THORChain Telegram group for India?
Yeah, I will starting to conduct the meeting to all users, and I will inform to all users to one of the best THORChain project after the Ethereum, Solana, and BTC. So allow the more peoples to follow and buy the tokens through their own chains on the Binance and so many listing apps.
You should have them buy it on THORChain.
Yeah, THORChain.
Thanks, man. I appreciate your support and everything.
I always support with THORChain. I will always stand with you.
Great. Any last questions, or are we done for the day?
That's it for today. Thanks so much, and thank you, Con, for coming up for so long. You guys are the goats. All right.
Oh,
Next week.
Yep. Bye, guys.
Bye.
See ya.
Cool. See you guys.